On this week's edition of New York Now, we'll sit down with the president of the Cannabis Association of New York to understand the challenges and changes in the legal market. Next, the State Department of Health Commissioner James McDonald joins us to discuss public health on the state and local level. I'm Chantal Destra, and this is New York Now.
Today, the Senate majority will pass legislation.
I will fight like hell for you every single day, like I've always done and always will.
Passing these bills on the floor, making it another stand.
Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Chantal Destra. In 2021, New York officially legalized the use of cannabis. This created an opportunity for a robust legal industry. But now, more than 3 years later, the road to getting there has been far from perfect, and there are several reasons for that reality. For one, there's been a slow process of issuing legal cannabis licenses. There's also been criticism and changes in leadership at the helm of the State Office of Cannabis Management. And another major issue is leaders have not been able to fully crack down on illegal cannabis shops across the state. But one thing remains clear to stakeholders within the industry, and that's the fact that there's so much work that needs to be done for its expansion. To understand the current challenges and the future of the industry, we sat down with Damian Cornwell, president of the Cannabis Association of New York. Thank you so much for joining us today, Damian.
Pleasure to be with you.
Now, it's just been a few years since cannabis was legalized in New York. From your purview, how would you describe the awareness of legal cannabis amongst New Yorkers and its impact on the industry?
So I think it's a process, and I think the wheels of change turn slow. I think that we're on a good trajectory right now. There are maybe 155 regulated stores that are open, and certainly we have a long way to go. I think we've had an awful lot of pitfalls that have been troubling to many people, and a lot of families have had hardships along the way, getting their farms up and getting their stores up. But I think overall, when you compare it to other markets, I think New York has done a good job at getting equity licenses out the door. And slowly but surely, I think that the state government is getting their hands around the initiative. And I think better days are going to arrive soon.
And it's my understanding that one of the main pillars of the Cannabis Association of New York is to create an industry that is inclusive. So what exactly does that look like from your purview?
So from our perspective, we want to see, we want to kind of become a chamber of commerce for cannabis as a whole. What I found as the president of Canny is that there was a lot of different silos within the market. And oftentimes you could see one group pitted against another group when really in real life, you need the entire market to work together to make a more sustainable economy as it relates to cannabis. So moving forward for us, we're doing all we can to bring those different facets of the industry together and help them grow as New York businesses so we can be stronger and profit from the market accordingly.
And what are you hearing from members within the association about how their work in the cannabis industry is impacting communities across the state?
Well, I think there's a lot of folks that, try to make impacts in their local communities. But what you find is when I talk to members, there's still a bit of frustration because some of their licenses are still not moving as quickly as they want at the state level. Some of the communication with some of our state partners is still being worked out. I mean, we have had recent changes in leadership. And so I think those things need to be worked out. It's kind of like you need one to do the other, right? So like just the other day, there was an announcement made at the Cannabis Control Board meeting where now there's going to be a rollback of some of the regulations that will allow us to do advertising. Well, it certainly was a hindrance when we couldn't advertise to the community at large and we wanted to do outreach. But now, because that's going to happen, we now can do that more. So that's what I mean. You need both things to happen. And I think people feel they can make an impact in local communities. They're just frustrated at the speed of change at the policy level.
And are there any challenges that they've highlighted about the industry in terms of the supply chain or their ability to sell?
I think the biggest issue, again, is in the beginning, the biggest issue was competing with an unregulated market, not to demonize people that are from the legacy side of cannabis, but it was just an unfair playing field, right? You had regulated operators that were paying a ton of money in taxes, couldn't advertise and do different things, and they're competing hand in hand with other stores that were unregulated and not following any of the rules that the government had set forth. So that's been frustrating for folks. And I think as that continues to get fixed, you'll find that people will be able to operate freely and successfully. The other thing that's important, I think, is that young regulated shops have had to battle the stigma that often goes with cannabis. In some ways, when you work with municipalities, it's almost discriminatory. You know, if you're a business and you're a cannabis business, your insurance rates go up. If you're a cannabis business, your lease goes up. I mean, these are problems that we would have never experienced if we had restaurants. But yet, because we sell a legal product, you know, there's a stigma that goes in the communities where it's harder to get approvals, it's harder to get through planning boards, it's harder to find lease properties that we can lease at reasonable rates. And I think that's very frustrating to people.
And you mentioned the change in leadership at the top of the Office of Cannabis Management, and we know that office has faced a lot of scrutiny regarding the slow rollout of legal cannabis shops across the state. Most recently, the Office of General Services released a report really highlighting that. So what do you make of the rollout and the criticism of the office?
I think it's to some extent almost premature. The findings are premature and also incomplete. Look, there's no question that the Office of Cannabis Management could have done better. Everyone could always do better. But I think that when I look at the report from OGS, I was somewhat disappointed that it didn't go further to look at all of the things that were involved in creating this market. I mean, the notion that the OCM, Office of Cannabis Management, rather, right, could, make its own hires or do all of its own things without approval from people above it or leadership in the state is just false. That's just not really true. And I just feel like if we really wanted to get to the bottom of this thing and really problem solve, we should look at the mirror from every perspective, just like you or I would do if we had a business. We'd have to leave no stone unturned to figure out what we could do different or better to make our initiative successful. And I just wish I had seen more from the report and that they continue to do so. But we are where we are today. I certainly have no desire to disparage anybody or demonize anybody. I'm positive. I want to go forward. I'm optimistic about the future.
So is there anything that the state should or could be doing more to help bolster the growth of the industry in New York at this juncture?
Yes, it has to meet with its stakeholders. It should be meeting with people like Canny, other organizations and experts in the industry from New York, understanding what we're seeing in the grassroots so we can make better decisions, better macro decisions that would help us, meet the challenges on the ground. I think sometimes there's this disconnect between policymakers and what really happens on the playing field. And I think the people that are successful put those two things together and come up with the best solutions.
And what do you make of the infrastructure in the state to actually grow cannabis? Are there ways that you think it could be improved?
It's hard to say right now because we're at such an early phase of this nascent market, right? So I just believe that in time will tell. And then if we can just work on how we interact and work with each other, there's nothing we can't accomplish. But if you can't fix that part where there's clarity and goals from the top levels of government all the way down to the grassroots of these organizations that interact every day in the day-to-day cannabis market, you'll have no chance to fix anything in the future. So that's what we need to be looking at, the blocking and tackling of cannabis. That's everything.
And what would you say to New Yorkers who may be wary about getting into the industry right now because of all the challenges that we've been discussing?
I think that there's a huge upside to the cannabis market. Look, we know that the market's going to grow to $7 billion a year. So from a macro perspective, yeah, it's great. You should go out and do it. However, from a practical perspective, unless you have, large cash reserves and a solid plan, and you have the wherewithal to withstand a slow rollout, it's not for you. It's certainly not for the faint of heart. That's what I would say.
And you briefly touched on this before, but how does the industry in the state stack up against other legal markets across the country? Is there anything that other states are doing that you think New York should or could be doing to help bolster the industry?
I think in the beginning, it was an opportunity missed to have not had a handle on the unregulated market. I really think that was a missed opportunity. I mean, man, that got away from everybody. And the second thing is, I think there's been, I think the OCM is understaffed. I think they need more resources to help hold people accountable. You know, law without accountability is lawlessness. I mean, I'm not bullish on, you know, rules and regulations, but you do have to have rules that people follow or the whole thing falls apart. And that's just the way that it is. Just have to have it that way. So I think that's a missed opportunity. I think that if I could do it, if I were king for the day, I would make sure that those things were all connected up and that, you know, we had a solid strategy and everybody knew exactly where they stood and there was accountability in place. And then you could have grown the market quicker. I still think there's a huge upside. And, you know, my mother used to say, all sickness is not death, right? Right, we can work it out. You know, you can get it fixed. You just gotta hunker down and make sure you have your strategy set and get going, which is why I think it's so important we focus on the blocking and tackling of how we operate this thing. That's the most important thing right now.
And would you say that the Office of Cannabis Management understands the gravity of the mistakes that have been made?
I think the OCM does,
Mm.
but is that the real question? Question is, if the OCM does, are they in line with the governor's office? And are those two aligned with the Cannabis Control Board and the CAB, right?
Mhm.
And then also, are people being held accountable within the grassroots of the industry? That's the real question. One person can't make it go, right? They'll just row in circles, right? You need
Right.
everybody rowing together to make it work. And that's the thing we're all missing because we're also anxious to get the market open, impatient and angry. And that doesn't solve anything for anyone. We need solutions and we need them now.
Lastly, where do you see the future of the legal cannabis industry in the state in the years to come?
Same thing, I think that the upside is insane. I've heard estimates where, you know, we could get up to $7 billion a year. I mean, think about what that money can do for our state infrastructure. Think about how many programs that can help. I mean, that's really what the goal is here. It's not to sling weed so we can all buy new cars. It's what we can do to elevate the standard of living for all the people in the state of New York. And it seems like nowadays, for saying something like that, nobody wants to hear that. But that's the real answer. That's the point of doing what we're doing, right? I take that seriously as the president of Canny and even as a person that operates a store in my community.
Mhm.
I think there's a huge upside. I just think we have to do things for the right reasons, the right way to get there.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. We thank you for taking the time to speak with us on this issue.
Yes, ma'am. You have a wonderful day as well.
And we were speaking with Damian Cornwell, president of the Cannabis Association of New York. And as Damian underscored in that conversation, in order for the industry to see true progress, all stakeholders need to have an all-hands-on-deck approach, including everyone from the State Office of Cannabis Management to the Cannabis Control Board and even the Executive Chamber. For more information and resources on the legal cannabis industry in New York, you can visit our website. That's at nynow.org. Now turning to another important topic, the State Department of Health is tasked with overseeing and protecting the health of New Yorkers. In order to do that, the office has focused on a direct patient care approach for health services, all while mitigating the challenges of low staffing levels. David Lombardo of WCNY's Capitol Press Room spoke with the State Department of Health Commissioner James McDonald for a comprehensive discussion about public health in the state. Here's that conversation.
Well, thank you so much for making the time, Commissioner. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So for starters, when it comes to public health, what is the state's responsibility to promote and, safeguard the public health?
Yeah, well, public health is a public function. Let's start there, right? And if the state isn't going to do it, and lead the effort, I'm just not sure who else would, right? We really need county health departments for that, but it really is a state function, public health. And one of the things I'll just make sure it's really clear is the New York State Department of Health is different than other health departments. We're actually probably one of the largest health departments in the country because we are one of the very few health departments that has Medicaid as part of its health department, plus the New York City of Health with the Essential Plan. So we're a large payer of healthcare. We supply a lot of, but we do all the public health too for the state with the county health departments as well. So we're much larger than other health departments because the New York State Department of Health, we're not just the New York State Department of Public Health or the New York State Department of Healthcare. We're the New York State Department of Health. We do it all. So we're pretty big in that regard.
And what does it mean, though, to promote public health or safeguard the public health? Is it about alerting people to when there's a disease that's spreading in a community? Is it about ensuring that there's the right amount of healthcare professionals around? What constitutes public health?
Yeah, so it's all of that plus more. And let me just give you our mission first. Because if I give you our mission, you can get a sort of perspective about how I look at the Department of Health. So our mission is to protect and promote the health and well-being for all, built on a foundation of health equity. So yes, it involves a lot of things. And I want to give you the example of Humpty Dumpty, which is probably not what you expected today. But we're pretty good at funding all the king's horses and all the king's men to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And I think one of the challenges in the United States in public health is making sure we have enough funding for the people who tell Humpty Dumpty, you're an egg, you have no business sitting on a wall in the first place. That's our prevention work. One of the other things we do in public health is we do that work where we tell Humpty Dumpty, if you have to sit on a wall for whatever reason, we're going to build you a harness. We're going to make sure you have matting so we protect you. That's another example of how public health works, where we have to help you customize your prevention a little bit. That's a little bit of a vignette of the New York State Department of Health with Humpty Dumpty at the center of that.
Well, let's stick with that idea then, because the vast majority of the state's healthcare spending goes towards insurance programs like Medicaid, or that downstream cost to, like you said, put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So does the ratio need to be shifted towards more of the preventative stuff, or do we need to think about it in terms of expanding the pie?
So I think about it this way. The vast majority of the money for the Department of Health goes into what I call direct patient care. In other words, we're paying for something that occurs in a room, exam room, operating room, delivery room, emergency room. That's an example of direct patient care. But even a lot of our Medicaid funding, our New York State of Health funding, is moving towards things that actually happen outside rooms. We talked about the 1115 waiver that we just got this year from the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Over half that money is actually going to things to improve everyone's social determinants of health, optimizing people's advantages so they're not getting care inside of just rooms. You asked, should we have more money towards prevention? The answer is always yes. But in the illustration I bring you from the 1115 waiver, though we got $7.5 billion from the federal government, $6 billion from the feds, $1.5 billion from the state, you do see over half that money is really geared towards things that occur outside of direct patient care. They're just examples of where I think the future of medicine is going. Because I think we're learning from what other countries are doing is if you don't improve people's social determinants of health, you really don't lengthen the quality of their life. And when I talk about social determinants of health, because that's a term of art, it's things like safe neighborhoods, safe housing. Governors made a big priority about safe housing. Making sure people have good education, another priority of the governors. And it really these are things that are really important. Like, what are the things that make us live longer? Transportation. These are social determinants of health. These are examples of an economic, opportunity. These are things that really matter to people that occur outside of the traditional healthcare model.
Well, sticking with the federal Medicaid waiver that you mentioned, when it comes to the flexibility to spend some of that money moving forward, what are your expectations? Is this something that's going to radically alter the public health landscape, or do you think this is something that's more around the margins and hopefully we can build on any successes we see?
Well, let's just take an example of the investment we have in workforce. Okay. Because we have an almost $700 million investment in workforce. Now, although $48 million is going towards loan repayment, and loan repayment is a worthy thing to invest in, you don't want all your money in loan repayment, because what you really want to do is spend most of the money in what are called career pathways training. And part of what I'm getting at there is I want to encourage people in high school to look at healthcare as a profession, people in college to look at healthcare as a profession, and people in graduate school, how to get through. But it really gets about how do we mentor people? How do we encourage people to get into a job in healthcare, which, by the way, healthcare jobs are not just financially rewarding, they actually nurture your soul as well. Because when you're helping people, you sleep well at night. Nice thing about healthcare jobs, too, is they're generally full-time, and they come with health insurance, which is really another critical social determinant of health. So that's an example how we use the 1115 waiver to kind of set us up for a future of success where we are helping the healthcare workforce. Another example in the LEM 15 waiver, though, is our social care networks. This is $3.4 billion that we have invested in this. And the social care networks are purposely being built in a way to actually improve people's individual social determinants of health. Do you need help with, if you're a Medicaid recipient, do you need help with housing? Do you need help with transportation? Do you need help with your chronic disease management? In other words, how do we customize the help you need? Recognizing, by the way, that New York is a big, big state. The needs of someone in the North Country might be different than someone in the city. And so the social care networks have the ability to customize what they're doing to optimize everyone's social determinants of health.
Well, you mentioned workforce, and when you and I spoke last year for the Capitol Press Room, shortly after your confirmation, you shared a goal you had of getting the State Department of Health back to quote-unquote full strength when it came to personnel by the end of 2023. Were you able to realize that goal? And if not, where in the personnel picture could there be improvements?
Yeah, so the Department of Health is growing. You know, I think it's no secret that during the pandemic, a lot of people left public health.
And even in the wake of the pandemic, though, you talked about 2022, you gained 800 people, but you also lost 800 people.
That's right. In 23, we were plus 300. So far, you know, in aggregate now, we're plus another couple hundred. So we're above pre-pandemic staffing. So we're heading in the right direction. I still have vacancies, but not massive amounts of vacancies. An example is, I'll tell you this story. When I came to interview the job at the New York State Department of Health, I met with Dr. Bassett. Keep in mind, I moved back home for family. I didn't move back for anything more than just being near my family. And Dr. Bassett was like, where do you want a job here? We got openings everywhere. Because for a public health physician, it's like, where do you want to work? We got, you know, very diverse resume. You've done everything. You can have any job you want here because there was all these openings. I don't have any openings for physicians right now at the New York State Department of Health. So that's an example of where we've actually recruited all the physicians we need right now. So that's an example of how we've made tangible progress. And, you know, culture matters, by the way. No matter what organization you're running, you've got to build a positive culture. And I'm very purposely trying to make sure we build at the New York State Department of Health a very positive culture. Because you spend the best hours of your day at work. I like people to be happy at work. That's really important to me.
Well, finally, do you see the job of public health changing dramatically in the near future, or does it remain relatively consistent in terms of the way people approach it, and maybe there's technological upgrades, but the basic premise remains the same?
I think one of the things about health equity that I'm most interested in seeing how we go is how we make sure people understand the word health equity.
Okay.
You know, it's funny, people use the word health equity, although I don't know that there's a common understanding of it. By the way, one of the things I'm a big believer in is try to take terms and make sure people can understand it after they hear it one time. Because New York State defined health equity in law, and I think that's great, but most people can't remember a paragraph after reading it one time. So the way we define health equity at the New York State Department of Health is recognizing when we work in health equity, it's intentional work. We recognize not everyone has the same starting point in life. Not everyone has the same advantages. Yet everyone deserves a fair and just opportunity for the best health outcomes. So there's an intentionality to that. But a fair and just opportunity for the best health outcomes kind of means you're going to customize as best you can. And I think one of the biggest things about public health in the future is how do we help customize our responses so different communities get the response they need. And I think that's one of those things. Now, there's certain core functions of public health that are never going to go away. Certainly, of course, it's the way we inspect restaurants, our surveillance function for various infectious disease threats, our public assurance functions for regulating physicians and PAs, and other things we do like the WIC program, Medicaid, New York State Health. There's all these functions that are going to persist no matter what in the future goes. One of the big things that's one of my big priorities at Department of Health is making sure we see this from a foundation of health equity. And I use the metaphor of foundation when I talk about health equity intentionally. A lot of people talk about the lens of health equity. I don't like the metaphor lens because I'm someone who wears glasses. I can take them on or take them off. I don't think the work in health equity is optional. Like, you cannot build a building without a foundation. And at the Department of Health, my feeling is it's a shared responsibility of everyone who works at the Department of Health to make sure the work connects to health equity, giving everyone that fair and just opportunity for the best health outcomes. Now, that does take investment, but one of the key things I think we need to grab as a culture is when we achieve health equity, everyone benefits. One of the favorite books I read during the pandemic was Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us. One of her big points was, when you achieve health equity, everyone benefits. For example, it's in everyone's best interest for everyone to have some kind of health insurance because healthcare providers get paid, people get access to care. It's in everyone's best interest for children to be nourished. So we'd like our WIC program to be, well enrolled and well subscribed, so we have the resources to make sure our kids are well nourished. These are just two examples of how making sure we maximize what we're doing benefits everyone.
Well, Commissioner McDonald, I think we're going to have to leave things there. I really appreciate you making the time and sharing your insights.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Look forward to doing it again.
And for more information and resources on public health in New York, you can visit our website. Again, that's at nynow.org. You can also subscribe to our newsletter by going to newsletter.nynow.org or by scanning the QR code on your screen. Well, that does it for this edition of New York Now. Thank you for tuning in and see you next week.
Funding for New York Now is provided by WNET,